FACCE-JPI. From 2010 to our future. FACCE-JPI started this journey 10 years ago to better understand the interactions between agriculture and the environment, especially climate, biodiversity, water, and soil. Agriculture depends on natural resources, and it is at the same time a driver and a victim of climate change. Farming accounts for 1/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions. These emissions cause climate change, and climate change affects farming, food and health systems. We aim to contribute to the European response to this situation through research, with an interdisciplinary approach in our projects, such as ReWater, to increase the efficiency of wastewater reuse for crop growth, EcoDeal, to attain pollination and pest control through biodiversity, or Climate Cafe, to adapt European agriculture systems to climate change. FACCE-JPI promotes transnational activities to help researchers, scientific knowledge and technology move freely. The European Research Area. We have 23 European members and New Zealand. We collaborate with other European and international initiatives. And we walk side by side with Horizon Europe. Furthermore, our initiative bridges science and policy. FACCE-JPI, on the road to preserve the planet, enhance biodiversity, provide nutritious food, and mitigate climate change.
My name is Barna Kovács. Welcome for everybody. The light of fasten your seatbelt was started. So I would kindly welcome all the speakers, presenters, panelists, and participants to the FACCE-JPI anniversary event. My name is Barna Kovács. I'm the Vice Chair of the FACCE-JPI Governing Board. And in the name of the board, I would like to welcome you this morning, saying that, yes, we are ready to start the second day, the second session of the day. For those who are not familiar, the FACCE-JPI stands for Agriculture, Joint Programming Initiative on Agriculture, Food Security and Climate Change. We are celebrating the 10 years anniversary, and we are planning to have, we are in the middle of a debate and the middle of a conference, which has threefold aims. Let me just recall the three aims. First, we wanted to share some thoughts about challenges, including key research concerns. Then we are aiming also to explore potential new pathways by showcasing past scientific results. And as a third aim, as a prioritized science policy discussion with the national and European decision makers about strategic urgencies. Based on these threefold aim, we were planning 3 blocks of sessions. Yesterday, we had a session with the Euractiv. It's a media lab, a well-known media lab in Europe, concerning the European food system, the transition towards sustainable and climate mitigation. Today, now in the morning, we have the second block, the session called the critical role of science, learning from the past to cope with the future challenges. And the third session during this afternoon, we plan to have it on the science, the cornerstone of the future European policies, working for a stronger European research area. Let me just recall you what happened yesterday. We had this meeting with Euractiv. There were more than 500 registered participants. We had 4 panelists from the European Commission, the European Parliament, from the FAO, and the chair of the Scientific Advisory Board of the FACCE-JPI. And in my opinion, we had a very good discussion. We aim to involve and engage the broader audience, the broader society. And for me, let me just to recall 3 ideas which just kept my attention, and I think they are important. The first one, which I can recall from yesterday, it was we have an overarching global context for several aspects of the food system, but to make it sustainable, we need to develop regional and local solutions. Thus, the diversity of a system should be supported by the research and innovation. Another item which I marked for myself, I think it was the developing European food system will require compromises. The trade-offs should be measured, and for this we need still research and innovation, evidence-based. And as a third point, I would like to mention from yesterday that the platform as the FACCE-JPI could help a lot about aligning the different countries' strategic agendas. The joint programming at European and global level should be enabled. So we had a fruitful discussion, which we are continuing today. And today we will discuss in a more selected environment. We are among researchers, policymakers, and we would like to discuss about the scientific results. Let me recall, it was a nice film just starting a few minutes ago, that the FACCE-JPI during the past 10 years mobilized more than 200 million euro. We had more than 121 projects. We had more than 600 publications. So our reservoir is big. We spent 10 years on understanding the climate change challenge. Now it's time to step further, prioritize, and take action on specific aspects. Thus, we renewed our strategic research and innovation agenda, having agriculture in the heart of food, of eco and climate system. Today, we are going to focus on 3 priority aspects. We are presenting our strategic research agenda. We are presenting our results. So we are bringing some results from the past to show our new strategic research agenda and to have a debate with the member state representatives who are dealing with the programming of research and innovation. They are setting national priorities. So I am looking forward to the debate. I hope that you are also taking part, and you will take part in this debate. For this, let me just remind you of the housekeeping rules. It's very important that the chat is for the general and technical questions. And the question and answer section is for questions to the speakers and panelists. I have colleagues from France, from Netherlands, and UK who are staying behind the scene. They are helping us with the chat, with the question and answers part, and helping you in having the debate, your questions. My role here is just to introduce the whole conference. I am the chair of the event, but what I would give you in good hands, because we have a professional moderator, Mr. Leo Enright, who was with us also in 2012 when we had a physical meeting in the conference of FACCE-JPI. And of course, we are keeping the good moderators, and we were calling him back. We need a person who will lead us, guide us through the today discussions. So by this, I would like to wish for all of us a fruitful discussion, and I would like to invite Leo to take over from me. All the best for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Barna, and happy anniversary. I'll ask our first speaker now to switch on her camera so I can introduce her. By way of introduction, I think of the great American writer Henry David Thoreau, who influenced ecologists like Rachel Carson. He famously wrote nearly 200 years ago, "Simplify, simplify." It wasn't a call for dumbing down. It was a call for clarity in the way that we think. Our keynote speaker today is a woman who has thought deeply about the ways in which science might connect with policymakers and with stakeholders. She was the Scottish Government's Chief Scientific Advisor on the Environment for many years and was chair of the FACCE Science Advisory Board until 2018. Professor of Integrated Land Use at Aberdeen University, Margaret Gill. Maggie.
Thank you very much, Leo, and thank you very much to the organisers for inviting me back to rejoin the FACCE community. Totally frustrating, as lots of things are in these uncertain times, in that I can't see you, but you can see me. So anyway, hope to see some of you later in the conference. I'm speaking about the role of science in simplifying complexity in uncertain times, and 2020 is certainly an uncertain time. If I can have the next slide, please. I'd just like to start, though, by congratulating FACCE. You've seen, those of you who joined in time to see the video, all the great things that FACCE has done. But I want to congratulate some of the behind the scenes. I've worked as a funder, I've worked as a scientist, and I know that it's often difficult to achieve consensus and compromise. So well done to everyone who's achieved that. Well done to everyone who's achieved all those fantastic outputs and leveraging all that money. But what I want to concentrate on this morning is adaptation. And FACCE has adapted over the last 20 years, adapted to not just the 2 points I put on the screen there, but also adapted to changes in the scientific environment, in the policy environment. And on the next slide, I start with an introduction, with a quote from Charles Darwin. We often talk about the fittest that survive, but going back to the quotes, the point in this quote, Charles Darwin was saying, it's not the strongest nor the most intelligent species, it's the one that is most responsive or most adaptable to change. So if you could click, please. Then the question that begs the questions below, are humans responsive to change? And I would argue we're still here. So therefore, we've obviously adapted. There've been huge changes since humans first populated the planet. But the rate of change is accelerating. And can we as a species change fast enough? Well, I would argue that the past responses, the reasons we've adapted, are partly down to science and partly down to policy. FACCE's area of that interaction between those two is absolutely critical. They're very different, those communities. Policies require simple solutions. Certainly true in COVID, that's been seen where simple restrictions are followed, whereas more complicated ones perhaps are not. Simple solutions, but the world is complex. And what I'm going to show is that science helps us to understand that complexity, and FACCE very much at the start, in the middle of that. But I would argue that we need to, if we're going to keep up with that accelerating rate of change, those two communities need to react much more, interact much more. Next slide, please. So I don't need to this audience to give you examples of increased complexity, but just to remind us that we need to deal with all those multiple dimensions. You saw some of the multiple dimensions of environment in the introductory video, but it's more than just what's going on within FACCE. We've also got to look at those dimensions that are beyond just environment and agriculture, food production. Next slide, please. So greater uncertainty. Well, I think until a few years ago, until 2020, we thought that the greatest uncertainty was climate change. And in the future, it absolutely is. Extreme weather events, the impact that has on yields and quality of crops. But what 2020 has shown us, the extent to which economic shocks can disrupt lifestyles around the world in every country. And 2020 has also shown us impact of political shocks. Sitting here in the UK, we're obviously in trepidation about what's going to happen on the 1st of January. We don't know when we leave the European Union what that means in terms of trade treaties, and there's not long to go. And I don't know how many millions of people around the world we're waiting in trepidation to see the outcome of the US election. So it's not just our own politics that create uncertainty, but also politics a long way away across that big ocean of water. And I put conflict on this as well, just to remind us that that is one of the outcomes potentially of some of these other shocks. And we need to think about it both in terms of food production, distribution, and also migration. Next slide, please. So what is the role of science? I'm thinking of science here, and I've put a framework of the outputs of research. But before moving down to those, I want to just bring your attention to innovation. Innovation is what has given us the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of COVID. All those scientists around the world producing those vaccines, which gives us hope. But my background has been much more at policy science interface. And that interface is helped by these outputs from research, data, knowledge, and mathematical models. Now, in the 21st century, data abounds. There's lots of it, the digital age. We've got all these sensors. We've got all sorts of different bits of technology generating data ever faster than we can actually look at it. But we also have now machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they can add to our ability to interpret all that data. But the quality of that data is uneven. And we should never forget that. I was trained in thinking about the accuracy of the data and therefore how many decimal places you actually quote it to. Now I see papers which quote to lots of decimal places when I know there's no accuracy around with that. I think it's for scientists, we really have to remember about that. And we also have to remember, but we have to think about how to align our science, the questions that we ask, with the answers that people are seeking. Knowledge. One of the really exciting bits of science for me was when I used to develop hypotheses, test them, and then see that they didn't work. And redesign those hypotheses, rethink through them, and come up with new ones. Science is not fact. Often the community, the general community, doesn't understand that scientific process. And we need to help them understand without losing their trust in science. I'll come back to that later. And then mathematical models. There's lots of those as well. And they're an excellent way of understanding that complexity. We heard earlier about the role of FACCE in identifying local solutions. Mathematical models are great for that. They take that complexity, but then they can tell you what are the priorities at a local level. What are the main drivers that we need to think about at a local level? The drivers for me, in my situation, currently living in the countryside, are not the same as for those of you living in big cities. Next slide, please. But I've talked about the outputs in terms of the tools that science produces, but science is also lots of papers. There's been a lot of new journals created, certainly during my academic career. How does anyone work out which is the right paper to look at if you're not a scientist? There's an amazing number of papers out there. I want to count how many different models of different diagrams of food systems are there. Then I came across this paper earlier in the summer, which actually gives us an idea of how we need to simplify some of those. It's a paper which looks at 32 international reports on food systems, and it analyzes those. And we need more of that. We need more of the analysis of the bringing together of the excellent messages that are out there that have been produced by researchers out there in the literature. But one thing I want to draw your attention to in this is, despite all those studies, what these authors came up with is one thing we haven't really researched in depth, is the governance mechanisms of food systems. Those power struggles, we talked about them often enough in FACCE, supermarkets, farmers, big food companies versus a consumer. Next slide, please. But I don't want to leave you thinking that policy is simple and science is complicated. What the message was that policy needs to come up with simple answers to communicate, to get people to follow. But I wanted to just draw your attention to this study undertaken by Fit for Food 2030. They did a study of all the food policies across Europe. This is just one set of pie charts from that, and I don't want to dwell on it, except to draw your attention to the left-hand side. Often when we think of food policies, we think of food safety or the Common Agricultural Policy, but there are a lot more. And as scientists, do we understand that? And do we understand the questions that those individual instruments of policy actually need? So, next slide, please. This is nothing new. The people in the IPCC had to deal with a lot. Being true to that scientific process, while we still retain the trust of non-scientists. So I don't want to dwell on that. I want to come to my final slide of key messages. Next slide, please. I want to just leave you thinking about, we have the tools from science to help with simplifying that complexity from down to that local situation, as was said before. The solutions lie at the local level. Research is one of our tools. And those tools, models, data, and knowledge, they can help with that dialogue. And we need to help them with that dialogue, but we also need to accept that they are not perfect, and we need to learn more about how to get those messages across. So thank you very much, and let me wish FACCE all the best for the future, hopefully for the next 10 years, and thanks for your attention. Back to you, Leo.
Thank you very much indeed, Maggie. A wonderful presentation. What you've spoken about, of course, you have lived through in many ways with FACCE over the past 10 years. What do you think are the lessons of the past 10 years from that experience of trying to cope with all of these complexities? And how do you think those lessons can be brought forward for the next 10 years?
I think the lessons are to listen to each other, to understand all the different perspectives without prejudging that we have the right way forward in terms of this. Scientists are passionate about their work, and they're often passionate about their particular perspective. And I think what I've really enjoyed in FACCE meetings and other meetings is when I start to see the world through someone else's point of view. And that's key in terms of moving forward. We will make fewer mistakes and hopefully start to deal with that acceleration of the change around us. So listening is one way. And also that synthesis, we keep generating new data, we keep analyzing what the problem is. There's a lot less about the solutions. We really absolutely need to focus on the solutions and action.
We'll be hearing from our next speaker about the strategic research agenda of FACCE. That's obviously a document which has been in constant evolution over the years, and you've been responsible for guiding much of this. We're seeing a new version out, and we're marking that event in some ways with this anniversary conference. How important is that, do you think, that strategic research strategy?
I think it's vital because it's what unites FACCE across those different communities on the funding side and the policy side, on the science side, and it's like a recipe book. Now, I'm not a person. I'm very bad at reading instruction books. I can tell you, I just always think intuitively I can do things. But in terms of FACCE, I did continually go back to that strategic research agenda. I don't have my worn copy with me of previous versions, but we should keep going back to it. Like food system, fix on one food system diagram, keep going back to it. And I focus on what is the big picture, what are we trying to achieve?
The famous quote from a British Prime Minister when he was asked, Harold Macmillan was asked what worries him most as a policymaker and as the great Prime Minister of a great country. And he turned around to the reporter and he said, events, dear boy, events. I mean, any strategy obviously cannot cope entirely with the unexpected. And you addressed that very clearly today. Do you think when we look at something like the great uncertainty of COVID this year, how do you think public trust in science is affected by these unexpected events?
I think there's two things about public trust in science in relation to COVID. And one is the contribution that science has undoubtedly made with the vaccines. Without that, we were headed for a huge long-term disaster. The other aspect is the scientists advising policy and feeding into the policy. And I live in Scotland, and so I watch both the politicians in Scotland and the politicians at the UK level just having discussions and with the public through the medium of television. And I think there are lessons to be learned from that in terms of the profile that you give to science early on. And I think during a lot of that, science was not well represented. So I think, again, I talked about governance studies, but I think there are also questions about science communication that are worthy of research. We really need to understand how to communicate that scientific process, as I said in the talk.
Thank you very much, Maggie Gill. And I'll ask you now to switch off your camera, and I'll ask our next speaker to introduce himself with his camera, as it were, as we look forward, as I said just a moment ago, to the strategic research agenda. FACCE-JPI was launched in 2010, as you know, to encourage collaboration between member states. We need to remember that almost 90% of European research is still planned and funded through national research programs. FACCE brings together the research capacity that is needed to tackle today's challenges. The whole point of this is to avoid unnecessary duplication and to align and integrate national programs. For an overview of FACCE's updated strategic research agenda, just published, let's hear now from Gianluca Brunori from the University of Pisa. He's the Vice Chairman of FACCE's Scientific Advisory Board. Gianluca.
Thank you very much, Leo, for this introduction. Thank to the organizers for inviting me to illustrate this strategic research agenda. And I also have the opportunity to say hello to Maggie, with whom I have lived my first 2 years in FACCE trying to understand the complexity of the architecture of FACCE. So as Leo said, with this presentation, I will briefly illustrate the FACCE strategic agenda that has been recently published, and I would warmly recommend you to download from the website. Next slide, please. And the next one. Okay, it is important to understand what is a strategic research agenda. Maggie has already said the importance of it. And actually, if you consider that FACCE is an ecosystem of researchers, institutions, policymakers, laboratories, you really need that all these people have a compass for their action. So I like to consider the strategic agenda as a compass for our activities, because the strategic agenda sets these challenges and objectives of FACCE, defines the scientific approach that will be at the basis of all initiatives, selects these thematic priorities, and identify the expected impacts and the means to achieve them. So next slide, please. And it is important in this context to, let's say, acquire awareness of the process that has guided the development of the research agenda. We had the first meetings and first discussions already when Maggie was chair, so 2 years ago. But during this month, we have had an intensified interaction between 4 different bodies: the Secretariat, the Governing Board, the Stakeholders Advisory Board, and the Scientific Advisory Board. So interaction that meant meetings, exchange of drafts and discussions, etc., in the bigger policy environment that was at that time changing quite fast, because we had the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals that are becoming more and more important also in the European legislation, but more recently the European Green Deal and Horizon Europe. Next slide, please. So let's first consider what is the scope of FACCE strategic research agenda. During our work, and from the very beginning, we were moving from the awareness that a commitment to sustainability implies a system approach. And the system approach implies to look at the interconnection of agriculture with climate system, ecosystem, and food systems. But at the same time, we were concerned about the risk of dispersing the focus. So a too broad focus would, let's say, dilute the resources dedicated to activities. So the following one, and what you can see in this picture, is the solution we have identified to capture the need for focus with a system approach. Our center and let's say our core business is the agricultural system, but we want to see it in relation to the other domains. So we want to understand how the 3 domains affect agriculture and how can agriculture can contribute to the challenges of the 3 domains. And moreover, the COVID pandemic has made us more aware of the need to anticipate and to be prepared to cope to the shocks that may occur at the intersection of the 3 domains. So it is very important to understand that shocks are always possible. What is important is to try to anticipate and be prepared to shocks. Next slide, please. So we turn this scope into 4 themes, and I will illustrate briefly these 4 themes. For each of the themes, we wanted, next slide, please, to consider at least 5 aspects, the problems that the theme addresses. So the scientific problem, but also the policy problem, how the problem is framed. Then we have the core themes and the key areas. And then we have the paradigms needed. We are aware that this situation in which we are living needs a transition to sustainable food system, to climate neutral systems. And in these cases, knowledge we had in the past, in some cases needs to be updated. So we need to flag what are the paradigms in which we can deploy our activities. But then we also want to focus on the impact, the expected impact of research, and also looking at potential game changers, not only in terms of technology game changers, but also policy and social game changers. Please, next slide. So we will focus in my illustration on the two aspects, core themes and expected impact. Next slide, please. The first one is climate neutrality in agriculture landscape. In this core theme, we really stress on the strategies for reduction of greenhouse gases in the primary sector. So we focus on carbon neutrality, carbon farming, carbon neutral footprints. So we want to check how, to what extent agriculture can contribute to this carbon neutrality. Next, and in terms of the impact, we want to develop carbon neutral agricultural practices. The second core theme is related to sustainable and resilient agriculture. So we move from carbon to a broader view of sustainability, taking into consideration ecological, social, and economic dimensions of sustainability, and our core themes reflect this. So biodiversity, soils, water use, pesticides, etc., but also livelihoods, competitiveness, and risk management and impact assessment. And in terms of impact, we want that these core themes contributes to the economic, ecological efficiency of agricultural production and to better livelihoods of farmers and agricultural workers. Third slide, the next slide, please. In the next slide, the title is Nutrition Sensitive Agricultural Production for Food Security. So the third theme relates to how agriculture can contribute to the type of food we want in the future. And the future food should be nutritious, should be healthy, and should be ecologically sustainable. And on this regard, we need to consider not only what food to produce. So, of course, a big issue is related to production, but also how this production can be delivered to consumers. So we need to consider the connections at the system level, and especially the links between producers and consumers. Next slide, please. And the fourth theme is related to trade-offs and synergies between food production, ecosystems, and climate. In this case, we start from the awareness that sustainability implies complexity. Complexity implies that there may be trade-offs between the different dimensions of sustainability and within the dimensions. And in some cases, conflicts may arise. So the way to overcome these potential conflicts is, in our view, at least this is the contribution FACCE can give, is knowledge, better knowledge. So using knowledge as a resource to, let's say, downgrade the complex problems into, let's say, complicated problems that are a step towards solving problems, and hopefully find a basis for win-win solutions and also evidence-based consensus frameworks. So next slides, and last one is how to deliver impact. We have, and in the strategic research agenda there is a list of activities and a kind of toolbox that we can have in order to achieve this impact. And let's say the most relevant tool the research calls is linked to other tools that can be put into synergy with this. And in some cases, they are even more important. For example, when there is the need of networking, exploring, scoping workshops, etc. But the second aspect of impact is stakeholders' involvement, not only at the level of governance of FACCE, but also in specific research projects. So stakeholders is encouraged at all levels of the activities. But then we need to improve accessibility of results with open data, open science, and especially interoperability of data to get a better quality of data, as also Maggie was referring to. And the third one is to strengthen the evaluation framework. The FACCE has already an evaluation framework, but this evaluation will be even more important in the future as a resource for a driver for institutional learning and innovation that should benefit all the FACCE ecosystem. And with this, I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Gianluca. We're getting plenty of questions in. We're going to hold on to them till we get to the discussion. Gianluca will be joining us for one of our discussion sessions later in the day. I'll ask our next speaker, Martin Bans, to join me, as it were, on stage. As I think most people tuning in today already know, FACCE-JPI is the joint programming initiative on food security, agriculture, and climate change for Europe, FACCE. But to get a full overview of the sheer complexity and richness of FACCE's programs, we thought we'd showcase a very small number of projects today. I would definitely urge you to check out the interactive Project Wheel website, which will tell you a lot more about what's been going on since 2010 and how each project fits into the overall FACCE strategic plan. First up today is MAXUR, looking at the potential impacts of climate change on European agriculture. Here to tell us more about it is Martin Bans of the Thunen Institute of Market Analysis in Germany. Martin.
Hi, Leo. Good morning. Thank you very much for this introduction. Yes, we have prepared a little video. I would like to show you. I'm the coordinator of this very interesting project, which started in June 2012 and in two phases, in two steps, concluded in May 2017. So please start the video and let's look what happened in MAXUR.
My name is Martin Banse. I'm working at the Thunen Institute in Braunschweig, Germany. I was the coordinator of the MAXUR project. MAXUR is the abbreviation for Modeling European Agriculture with Climate Change for Food Security. And I would like to express on the behalf of the entire research consortium our honest congratulations for 10 years of JPI work. We really enjoyed the collaboration with the JPI Center over 5 years of working at our knowledge hub. It was the first knowledge hub JPI initiated. And most of our colleagues, when we started MAXUR, asked us, what is a knowledge hub? A knowledge hub is a new instrument, or it was a new instrument, on the concept of networks and excellence. So our knowledge hub, MAXUR, brought together a research group that already were active in the area, on this thematic area, and we And we used the support for coordinating, for travels, for organizing workshops over the period of our project of 5 years period of MAXUR. So MAXUR was started in 2012 with 16 or 17 countries all over Europe, from Norway down to Israel. So we had 180 members in the beginning, and we had very little money, something between 2 and 3 million euros in total. In the second part of MAXUR, after 3 years, we extended our network with 18 countries. We became a larger group of 300 members, and we started our second phase in June 2015. Already after 3 years of working in MAXUR, with these almost 300 partners, we collected 500 presentations. We worked in 20 workshops and conferences. We were active in 13 new funded projects, and more than 20 to 25 PhD students worked in our network. So it was really a generator for knowledge on the topic of agriculture and climate change. We focused in MAXUR on 5 different aims. So one aim was to improve and to integrate models. Models for crop, for livestock, and for economics. So not only one part of agriculture, but all activities within agriculture were covered in our models. We wanted to integrate and to develop model linkages between these different models to have a better understanding on the consequences of climate change on European agriculture at different scales. So not only at the field level or at a county level, but also at the level of countries, of a member state, of the EU member state, of the entire Europe, or at global level. So how does Europe as one continent work and acts together at a global economy with other regions? We wanted in MAXUR to identify risks and challenges that is created by climate change and has a strong impact on agriculture, and we wanted also to understand how mitigation policies, climate policies, will have an impact on agriculture in Europe. So our key activities in MAXUR were about to develop good practice approaches for modeling. We wanted, as I described it, to integrate and to compare models in its outcome on what happens under climate change. We wanted to run and to understand better what are the risks related with climate change at different regions and for different regions if we deal with climate change. And we wanted to run regional case studies that analyzes and describes the impact of climate change for these different regions. And we want to develop a stepwise approach, not only at the regional level, but at national and European level. As you can see on the next slide, we run our project with different models, with a cascade of models at field level, at local level, at county level, at the country or member state level, and the continental level. And not only for applying models for cropping, for livestock, but also to integrate all these activities in economic models to understand better also the economic consequences of climate change on European agriculture. So we have already a good understanding of the impact of climate change to the yield level, to the variation of yields, but a better understanding of the economic consequences require a model integration that covers all different activities, that covers all different economic drivers at different layers, as you can see on this slide. And it's a multi-scale integration of models across different layers, which is new, where we learned a lot, where we also learned to communicate with each other. It was a transdisciplinary approach in Maxur, and this was in the very early phase a real challenge for our community of around 300 researchers. As I already described, it's not only that Maxur took the challenge to integrate models, it was also a challenging work to integrate modelers. And for that purpose, we brought together different teams that worked on the integration of models for the case studies, for the regional case study, and at European level. So on the next slide, you see a good example on the left-hand side how our biophysical models worked at European scale, looking at the impact of climate change on the level of yields, on the content, so protein or carbohydrates for different crops, to understand the impact of climate change on the field, so on the level of the field, to upscale this to a national and to a European level and bring it back to the regional level is also described now on the right-hand side of this slide, where we describe how the Maxur case studies or regional studies worked. So from here we understood pretty well that Maxur requires more than working on crop models, on livestock models, and on economic models. But the next step was to integrate activities in these three pillars, so to say, and that was the background or the backbone, so to say, and the major part of our second part, where we worked on the integration, on so-called cross-cutting activities, where we integrated work of crop, of livestock, and of economic modeling. And also for that part we published so many papers, especially on the integration of these different model activities, so we have a better understanding now of the variability of extreme climatic events at different levels, at regional level. We understand and identify sustainable opportunity to reduce yield gaps in Europe. We have a better understanding how to feed livestock under extreme climate conditions, and we know a little bit more about the impact on ecosystem services and rural developments. So this all brings together a better understanding how mitigation policies for climate will have an impact on agriculture, and this is also something we would like to continue and further develop in a third phase we currently develop in a group of colleagues also from the old consortia of Maxur, where we more deal with policy related questions in the area of climate policies, where we deal with specific questions in specific countries, how the challenges of climate change requires adopted mitigation policies, and how we bring policymakers in a better position to develop good policies and that are adopted for the requirements at regional and national level to fight the consequences and the impact of climate change on agriculture in Europe. Thank you very much and all the best. That was my short presentation on the success story of Maxur, and I hoped to see you all on our meeting on the 10 years anniversary party of JPI. It's now online. Congratulations again on behalf of the entire Maxur group, and let's party at a later moment in time. All the best.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin. I think I heard a cheer echo around Europe when you talked about the huge amount of support that your program offered to PhD students. It's a subject that I would very much like to explore a bit further in our discussions later in the day, the importance of supporting up-and-coming young researchers. Yep. But Martin, more specifically to the Maxur project, what sort of follow-ups are planned? Where do we go from here is the famous question every journalist asks.
Yeah, where do we go from here? Already Maggie addressed this issue in her presentation today. I mean, Maxur, as I described, was a knowledge hub where researchers from different community interacted, communicated, did great research. We published a lot of papers. We had so many seminars. We started the communication and the process with policymakers. So the question, how to come up with solutions, how to come up with ideas. Solutions are found at local, at regional level, as Maggie already indicated. And that's an important part we would like to address. So Maxur was really more at a European-wide level research activities for different case studies, but we really would like to go more into the detail at national or regional level, talking to policymakers, talking to stakeholders to develop also appropriate mitigation policy instruments and to run these policy at regional or local level in cases. And this is something which is still missing. And we clearly found out this is a need for a third phase of Maxur.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin. Terrific stuff. I'm going to call now on Catherine Stanton to join us to talk about a project that really is one that's particularly close to my own heart. MethLab has been making headlines in the Irish media since 2016. Our next speaker, in fact, is seldom out of the newspapers in Ireland. She's Catherine Stanton of Teagasc, the Agriculture and Food Development Authority in Ireland. Catherine.
Thank you. And hello and good morning. I'm Catherine Stanton, coordinator of the MethLab project. And we have made a video outlining the research in the MethLab project, which is about addressing the use of lactic acid bacteria to reduce methane emission in ruminants. So let's see the video, please. While ruminant animals play an important role in sustainable agricultural systems, they're also an important source of greenhouse gas emissions, especially methane. Methane is produced during enteric fermentation, a digestive process whereby microbes in the forestomach of ruminants digest plant materials into nutrients that the animal then uses for the production of high-quality produce such as milk and meat. In the coming decades, livestock farmers face numerous challenges, and the development of technologies and practices that support sustainable food production while moderating greenhouse gas emissions are urgently required. More than 100 countries have committed to reducing agricultural greenhouse gas emissions and have signed up to the 2015 Paris Agreement on Climate Change. However, known agricultural practices could deliver just 20 to 40% of the needed reduction, even if delivered fully at scale. Therefore, new mitigation options are needed to ensure sustainable food production into the future. One possible approach to methane reduction is the use of lactic acid bacteria. These are gram-positive bacteria that produce lactic acid as a major end product of carbohydrate fermentation. Lactic acid bacteria are natural inhabitants of the intestine of mammals and are among the most important groups of organisms used in food fermentation. Lactic acid bacteria are readily isolated from ruminants and are currently used on farm as direct-fed microbials and silage inoculants to increase production and improve the health of animals. These organisms are well-established industrial microorganisms economically produced at large scale for incorporation into animal feed, making them ideally suited as a microbial technology. While it has been proposed that LAB could be used to reduce methane emissions in livestock animals, research so far is limited and data supporting the concept are lacking. The MethLab project is investigating the possible use of lactic acid bacteria as a methane mitigation strategy on farm. The aims of the MethLab project are to test and implement lactic acid bacteria as a methane mitigation strategy. The goal is to refine current on-farm technologies such as direct-fed microbials and silage inoculants currently used on-farm to increase production and enhance animal health with a methane-reducing benefit. An intensive screening programme was carried out where lactic acid bacteria from various environmental sources as well as pre-existing cultures within our culture collections were screened for bacteriocin production. Bacteriocins are inhibitory compounds that are synthesized ribosomally. To test bacteriocin potential of lactic acid bacteria, well-diffusion assays were carried out. These assays demonstrate the potency and efficacy of the bacteriocins produced. Bacteriocins function against indicator strains through permeating the cell wall and causing cell lysis. Following on from the screen, cell-free supernatants of the lactic acid bacteria with the superior bacteriocin production were incorporated into assays which tested for methane reduction in methanogens. The cell-free supernatants were tested against a range of methanogenic archaea. Rumen methanogenic archaea are the organisms responsible for producing methane, where they use hydrogen and methyl-containing compounds generated as fermentation end products during anaerobic respiration. This methane is then belched and exhaled from the lungs via respiration from the animal and released to the atmosphere. Targeting these organisms should significantly reduce the methane produced by the ruminant. Alternatively, the use of bacteriocin-producing LAB could be used to target other organisms present in the rumen that produce precursors in the methanogenesis pathway. The methanogen screening was carried out in vitro in Teagasc in Ireland and at Ag Research in New Zealand. The superior LAB strains from these tests were then selected to be tested as silage inoculants in mini silos. The strains which showed the best results in terms of reduced loss in dry matter and digestibility were then chosen for future animal trials. Large-scale silage production was undertaken in the Netherlands, New Zealand and Ireland using the chosen LAB strains. The inoculated silage was fed to cattle and sheep to confirm efficacy of methane reduction in vivo. To date, some of the feeding trials have already been conducted and data analysis is ongoing. Using superior microbial inoculants identified in this project, we aim to improve the quality of ruminant feeds, which will lead to a reduction in methane and enhance livestock production. To achieve this, we aim to monitor animal productivity, including animal weight, milk quantity and quality. Additionally, methane measurements, which are of utmost importance, are being carried out. A green feed will be used, which is a system designed for measuring methane gas from individual animals. It is our aim that these MethLab strains will improve animal productivity while simultaneously reducing methane emissions. MethLab will thus lead to environmental and societal benefits with the potential to deliver green jobs and enhance the competitiveness of the agri-food sector. Projects like this are key factors in contributing to global greenhouse gas reduction. MethLab brings together a global network of multidisciplinary researchers to enhance impact and advance technology transfer of lactic acid bacteria on farm technologies. MethLab addressed the reduction of methane emissions in ruminants, in particular cattle and sheep production systems. The consortium is led by Teagasc and involves partners from University College Cork, Ireland, INRA in France, Wageningen University in the Netherlands, Ag Research in New Zealand and the culture company SACCO in Italy. The EU funding amounted to over €1 million and the project duration was 36 months. The partners in this proposal are from Global Research Alliance member countries that share the goal of reducing methane emission intensity across ruminant classes in a manner that maintains agricultural production and sustains environmental integrity.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Lovely video. Just to say to people that for reasons which aren't entirely clear, but I suspect it's to do with something called the frame rate, the video may appear a little bit jerky to some viewers. Our apologies for that, but we're pressing ahead for the simple reason that really it doesn't affect the message that's coming across so beautifully from Catherine and Martin's videos so far. We're getting the information we need, and it's a very minor irritation. We'll have a look at it, but we're going to press ahead. Catherine, thank you so much. I was wondering, you mentioned, of course, your collaboration with New Zealand. How important was that to you? And do you think that this is something, you know, the opportunity to break out of the smaller FACCE group into this wider collaboration across the globe? How valuable do you think that can be?
Thank you, Elio. That's a great question. And indeed, the collaboration with the New Zealand group was highly beneficial, because obviously the whole issue is a global problem and we need global solutions. And indeed, the group in New Zealand, given the importance of this agricultural to New Zealand and the importance of sustainable food production, and also the high quality of the research group that we work with in New Zealand, it really added value to the METLAB project. So absolutely. And beyond that, it's highly important to address these issues globally and identify key global researchers to work with to achieve the goal.
I mentioned in my introduction that you're a bit of a megastar in Ireland, just to embarrass you, of course. But on a serious point, you're very lucky in Teagasc, of course, to be supported by an outstanding public outreach department. I wonder, you know, how important is this sort of exposure to your actual work, or is it just a useful add-on? I'm thinking particularly about the fact that politicians, senior policymakers in government, they switch on their television in the evening and up you pop talking about ruminants from the wonderful Moore Park Research Centre. How valuable is it in your messaging to policymakers and legislators?
Absolutely. I mean, it's important that the research is meaningful and valuable to society, and getting that message across to policymakers is highly important, and important to influence the future direction of research as well. So yes, indeed, Teagasc has a great communication network and you know, strong connections with the department and the government ministers, and that's highly important to get the right messages to the right people.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. We'll turn now. I'll ask Pete Smith to switch on his camera to talk about one of the greatest challenges that we now face, which is, of course, how to feed a growing population with limited land resources. That's the subject of DEVIL, delivering food security on limited land. Our next speaker is a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, no less. Not many people can say that, but of course he did share it with Al Gore and with 675 other authors of the IPCC Fourth Assessment Report. Pete Smith is Professor of Soils and Global Change at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. Pete.
Thanks, Leo. So I'm just going to present a little bit before we go on to watch a short video from the DEVIL project, which is delivering food on limited land. It was a joint funding between FACCE-JPI and the Belmont Forum. We had a total funding of €1.6 million, postdocs and three graduate students and several during the project. So because we had co-funding from the Belmont Forum, we were able to go global. So the partners were the University of Aberdeen, University of Minnesota in the US, ETH Zurich in Switzerland, the National Rice Research Institute in India, the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, the James Hutton Institute and King's College London in UK, CSIRO in France, INRAE, CSIRO in Australia, INRAE in France, INPI in Brazil. And we had another partner join because they saw what we were doing and they wanted to join the party. So we had the Institute of Remote Sensing and Digital Earth from the Chinese Academy of Sciences join the project with their own funding. The aim of the project is to see how we can deliver safe and nutritious food on the limited land that we have available on the planet, now and in the future, given population growth, changing demand. Projects were that projected population increases and demand changes cannot be sustained. We cannot sustain these into the future. So we need a combination of sustainable intensification, dietary change towards sustainable healthy diets, and waste reduction. We need a combination of these if we're able to feed in 2050 on the limited land that we have. And we found that we looked at 4 case study regions: South Asia, South Africa, South America, and East Asia. And of course, those systems play out differently in each of those regions, but there are central elements to each of those regions. So it's a successful project. We had over 55 papers from the project, including papers in Nature, Nature Climate Change, Nature Sustainability, the Lancet Planetary Health, and the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. We delivered 41 conference talks and posters, 8 articles in popular science outlets, and we contributed to multi-year primers, which had over 65,000 visits from 175 countries. Yeah, there have been claims that soil carbon gains under grazing livestock offset all the methane emissions from cattle. So this video examines that claim. I show it as an example of how Devil tried to be relevant not just to scientists, but also to the wider public. So let's start the video now. I hope you enjoy it.
Grazed and confused. How much can grazing livestock help to mitigate climate change? These are ruminants. Ruminants have specialized stomachs containing microorganisms. This allows them to eat hard-to-digest plants like grass, unlike pigs and chickens. However, these microorganisms also produce methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, and the more fibrous the ruminant's diets, the more methane is produced. Ruminants are responsible for the majority of greenhouse gas emissions from all livestock, and 11.6% of all human-related emissions. Cattle, being the most numerous species, account for most of ruminant emissions. Demand for meat and other animal products is expected to grow, and as a result, so are livestock emissions. This presents a problem, because if global warming is to be kept below the goal of 2 degrees Celsius, global greenhouse gas emissions need to fall to 0 by mid-century. And to achieve this, all human activities need to contribute to reducing emissions, including the livestock sector. While most agree that emissions from the livestock sector need addressing if we are to achieve our climate goals, how and by how much are more contested questions. In particular, when it comes to grass-fed livestock, some argue that research on their emissions ignores a crucial part of the picture: the potential for grass-fed ruminants to help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Specifically, they argue that by carefully managing the way animals graze the land, plants can be stimulated to grow more vigorously, taking more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere via photosynthesis, leading to more carbon being stored in their shoots and especially in and around their roots. And that some of this carbon, when buried in the soil, may be converted into stable forms, resistant to decomposition, rather than being turned back into carbon dioxide by soil microbes. The result? Carbon's long-term removal from the atmosphere, a process known as soil carbon sequestration. It's claimed that when the greenhouse gas emissions from grass-fed ruminants are compared with the removals of carbon dioxide resulting from grazing, all the emissions from the grass-fed animals could be partially or even entirely offset. Some even claim that this sequestration effect from grazing could potentially offset all emissions from all forms of livestock production, and perhaps even solve the problem of climate change. This debate has left many policymakers and the public feeling confused. Can grazing livestock really help mitigate climate change? And if so, by how much? To address these questions, an international group of researchers came together to provide answers. It's important to note that there are many social, ethical, and environmental issues to think about when considering grass-fed livestock's role in a sustainable food system. But the researchers' analysis focused on just one important aspect of this wider picture: grass-fed livestock and the net balance of all their greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for both emissions and any removals via sequestration. The research did not compare grass-fed livestock with any other production system or species of livestock. First, they reviewed all sources of emissions from grass-fed livestock, including those from clearing natural land, producing animal feed, animal digestion, and animal manure. Next, using optimistic assumptions, they identified how much carbon could potentially be removed from the atmosphere if the way grazing is managed today were improved worldwide, so as to promote increased carbon sequestration. The research found that even if the sequestration potential from grazing were maximised at the global level, grazing livestock would still be a net contributor to the climate problem, and that the reduction in emissions that this could deliver would be small when compared to total emissions from the livestock sector. In some specific contexts, where the climate, soil, land use history, and grazing management are just right, additional carbon can be removed from the atmosphere and sequestered in soils. But realistic rates for this are far below those claimed outside of the scientific literature. And only rarely can sequestration outweigh the greenhouse gas emissions from grazing animals living on the land. Even where changes to grazing management do lead to sequestration, within decades of introducing the change in grazing, a new equilibrium is achieved between carbon entering and leaving the soil. And so, the rate of sequestration falls back to a level close to zero. Meanwhile, animals still continue to emit greenhouse gases, contributing to climate change. Additionally, any sequestration gains may also be reversed later on through poor land management or a change in climate. So, what conclusions can we draw about grazing livestock's role in climate mitigation? Better grazing management is certainly worthwhile for many reasons. Yet grazing-induced removals via soil carbon sequestration do not offer a substantial mitigation opportunity. Grassland soils worldwide already contain vast carbon stores, larger than all of the world's forests, and importantly, this stored carbon can be lost much faster than it can be accumulated again, which means that stopping poor grazing practices that degrade land through overuse or misuse should be a priority, as should halting the conversion of grasslands into new cropland, which quickly releases up to half of the carbon stored. And what does this mean for grass-fed livestock's role in sustainable food systems? Answering that question adequately requires a comprehensive sustainability assessment, reaching way beyond climate change issues and undertaking far beyond the scope of this research. Nevertheless, the study does contribute one important piece of the wider puzzle. Growing emissions from the livestock sector remain a problem, and to reduce emissions from the sector and meet our climate goals, we need to make changes to animal product consumption as well as production. In other words, whatever the animal species or method of production, high-consuming individuals and nations have to moderate their intake of animal-sourced foods.
Wonderful video, Pete. Congratulations. That definitely is Oscar-winning stuff, and some nice humorous touches as well. So, Pete, we are keen during the course of today to make sure that we bring in and mention regularly the stakeholders and the importance that they have in FACCE-JPI's mission. I wonder, could you speak to their role in your project and how important you found the stakeholders to be?
Yeah, sure. We involve stakeholders both at the policy level and at the practice level, so individual farmers. What was really interesting about doing a project with partners in South America, South Africa, Asia and India was that we could, we're looking at very different agricultural systems. So it was really interesting to include some stakeholders in those discussions, both local policymakers and also local practitioners. So we had two different sets of workshops in each of those different countries, and it was really illuminating. We have a sort of perception from modelling these things in Europe that it's all going to be easy to solve, but you don't really, until you speak to the local stakeholders, appreciate the barriers to implementation that are available and how to overcome them.
I'd be grateful, Peter, just speaking to the audience, I'd be grateful if people would identify themselves. We're getting lots of questions, and it would be helpful to know who's asking the question. For instance, we have one here anonymously, which is very interesting, and I'm keen to hear your comments on it, Pete, even though it's an anonymous question. This contributor says, the message in the video seems to contradict the information contained in the IPCC assessment reports, where they say grassland grazing management is assumed to have a significant mitigation potential associated with it. How would you answer that?
The question that the little video addresses, so we can definitely manage our soils better and improve the grazing and increase the carbon sequestration, but that doesn't offset all of the emissions that are emitted from cattle. That's not to say that we shouldn't improve it, because there are so many other reasons other than climate change for management. It's something we must do. So there's no inconsistency as the lead author on that chapter.
Okay, Pete, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. And once again, congratulations on the video. Our final presentation in this part of the meeting is on the agro-nickel project, which really is like something out of science fiction, using plants to mine rare minerals in the soil. Let's hear the details from Guillaume Echeverria of the Université de Lorraine.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to present what is, I hope to convince you, not science fiction, but a true reality. So our project AgroNickel was funded in the FACCE surplus program, which I thank again for the strong support it provided to our community. This involved institutions from 6 countries inside the EU and another country, which is a EU candidate, Albania, where the whole story started. I was, of course, the coordinator of that project from the University of Lorraine and Rni in France. And well, I won't explain you into details what agro-mining is, because the short video you will see just after my short talk will explain you into details what we do in agro-mining. Just to tell you that it is a combination of course, topics such as bioeconomy and circular economy. Hyperaccumulator plants were discovered, I should say, in the late 40s, but really they were defined as they are in the mid 70s. So that's only 45 years ago. And hyperaccumulator plants just take up metals the way they take up nutrients, so in the same proportions. In the case of nickel, we're talking about plants that can take up more than 1%, several percent of nickel in the leaves and the rest of the shoots. And this made possible the idea in the early 80s. US scientist, Rufus Cheney from USDA, just had the wonderful idea of saying, well, we could create something that can be called phyto mining. And phyto mining just later on became agro mining. Why? Just because it's the combination of different processes of steps that go from how to cultivate a new crop and just go to the final product, which is pure nickel compounds, salts, or metal. So that brings together three communities, of course, agronomists and environmentalists, of course, the mineral resource geology and mining researchers, and of course, metallurgists and process engineer scientists. So this makes a full chain, and it is now, and it was put up for the FACCE surplus call, the first call. It was put up as in the context of issues of agroecology, climate change, biodiversity issues, of course, the shortage of some raw materials. I'm talking about metals. And now we see with the car batteries that, of course, lithium, cobalt, and nickel are being under pressure, and the demand will just increase. Of course, agro-mining will not address all the demands for nickel globally, because it can only be a side production, but it is designed to be let's say, a sustainable production. So just in 1 minute, the outcomes, of course, besides just typical scientific support and publications, there was a book that was published bringing together all the knowledge on agro-mining, and the second issue is about to be released in a couple of weeks. And that includes a lot of the results from the AgroNickel project. There was also a live AgroMine project, a live program, which supports demonstration and pilot level projects. So we switched up to the demonstration level. And of course, a French startup company was created, which now employs 6 permanent collaborators to develop agro-mining for interested clients, such as stainless steel producers or glass makers. There was also of course, we were talking about stakeholders for other projects. So agro-mining doesn't exist as an activity, so it needs some regulation improvements. And there was a strong operation at the French level that allowed us to identify the regulation bottlenecks. And we were charged by the Ministry of Ecological Transition to identify those bottlenecks so that they could improve the circular economy context. So the video will just explain you what agro-mining is, what are the different steps, and moreover, what are some of the socioeconomic issues associated with it. Thank you.
Wonderful video, Guillaume. That also deserves an Oscar. Very, very interesting stuff. We're getting a lot of interesting responses, as you can imagine. People are absolutely intrigued by all of this. It won't be new, of course, to a lot of our expert audience. But for lay people listening in, I think this will definitely be exciting news. One interesting question from Christine Buntoff of WR. She wonders, can heavy metals also be taken out of the soil by microorganisms? What are the advantages or the disadvantages of using plants?
Yes, well, actually, and that was investigated in the AgroNickel project. It was so huge, I couldn't give any detail. But what we did was to combine all the new techniques now used in agroecology, including soil bacteria and fungi that can help plants to mobilize the metals and to increase the uptake by the plant. But themselves, there is no real possibility in the soil, because then the question is how to separate the microorganisms from the ultramafic soils.
Understood, understood. As I said, we're getting a lot of questions. We've got a comment rather than a question from Aldert van Wieren. I believe he has a particular interest in wetlands, and he's remarking that he believes that this new technology could be very useful in re-wetted fenlands to reduce carbon emissions from peatlands. He cites particularly the example of reed canary grass.
Well, maybe that could be something that needs investigation. But, well, besides nickel, of course, there is aluminium, manganese, cadmium, zinc, selenium. So all these elements can be taken up in huge quantities by plants. So maybe in that specific context, I don't know about the capacities of reed, but yes, why not? Well, just I wanted to mention, because it wasn't said, that these ultramafic soils, they cover more than 10,000 square kilometers across Europe, and mainly along the Alps and other regions in the Balkans. So yes, and some of them include wetlands that are, well, the problem is also the use of farmers of these lands that are sometimes abandoned.
Our next session is a panel discussion on national research priorities. We've plenty of time to get into the weeds, if you'll excuse the terrible pun, in this session. I'm sure, as everybody here knows by now, there is a new strategic research agenda of FACCE-JPI. And in this session, we want to focus on how that FACCE agenda can contribute to national research priorities. We'll hear the perspective of 3 national representatives and also from the chair and vice chair of FACCE-JPI. So let me first introduce our panelists, and I'll ask them to switch on their cameras at this stage. First of all, Gudrun Langthaler is the chair of the FACCE-JPI Governing Board. She's a special advisor in the Department of Bioeconomy at the Research Council of Norway. Jose Manuel Gonzalez Vicente is the Spanish delegate to Horizon 2020, Societal Challenges 2 Program Committee. Agata Fox is the Polish delegate to the Horizon 2020 SC2 Program Committee. My old friend Frank O'Mara is Director of Research at Teagasc, the Agriculture and Food Development Authority in Ireland. And of course, we've already heard from Gianluca Brunori before. He's the vice chair of the FACCE-JPI Scientific Advisory Board. So I thought we would begin by hearing from each of our panelists briefly. I'm keen, I think, to hear initially what you think your main issues and priorities are concerning research in the field of agriculture and food security. Gudrun, I'll give you the chair.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. And I really have a pleasure on behalf of the governing board and being the chair since the summer for this great JPI, I have the pleasure to welcome you to our celebration as well. So this is really a great day for me and our governing board. I will not talk so much about national priorities because my role is more kind of to give you an overview of FACCE-JPI. Of course, a lot is said. You have seen the videos a few times, but it's just to repeat actually when I look back, because since we are celebrating 10 years, looking back, and I remember in the late 2000s, the Lund Declaration actually gave us a wake-up call. We were actually getting aware of how pertinent it is, how important it is to address societal challenges. And that gave rise to the renewed European research area to actually bring member states' resources together, create critical mass, and address the societal challenges together with the Commission efforts, of course, it's all together. So we are 24 countries, mainly from the European Union, but also associated countries and New Zealand, we have seen that. And our main goal is to align and make a difference by finding solutions through co-investment in research and innovation activities for these societal challenges. And here I would like to take the chance to thank all the members of our scientific advisory boards, and I think of previous members and members of today who really advise us, because we are funders, we are coming from the ministries, so we are more into policies or research research policies. So your advice is so important, and at the same time, I would like to thank the Stakeholders Advisory Board, also all members representing a whole range of different interest groups, which is crucial to actually make us work on that way. So what have we done? We have created new instruments. We have co-invested in many, many calls, and you have seen just 4 examples of projects which are great, which are impressing, and I think they are so important to actually make us aware, understand, and then find the solutions together. The question is, of course, now, what is the way forward? And I think it's important that we understand that we are to contribute to policies. And here, of course, the European Green Deal is central, with the farm to fork, with the biodiversity strategies, other strategies, and national policies, because we also have national policies. It's not only the European Union. So our renewed SRA is central to do that. And the whole session is called Learning from the Past to Cope with the Future Challenges. And I think this is what it is all about now, also in this session. We must get the advice what we should prioritize. So we will listen to the countries, we will listen to the scientists. That's our main role. And last but not least, I would like to emphasize also the role of the European Commission. We have really done that together. We have cooperated. Yes, we are a member state-driven initiative, but our cooperation has been very important. We have received funding to actually coordinate our starting years. We have received support for that, and we have co-invested through ERA-NETs. So many of these projects are co-investments from member states and also the European Commission. And Horizon Europe, the European partnerships, and perhaps especially the one on agroecology, living labs, and research infrastructures are crucial for us in the new way, in the new era, European research area where we will cooperate. And also regarding the missions, because this will take a huge, will receive huge attention also in the very near future. So the key is co-creation and transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Gudrun. Let's turn now to Jose Manuel for the view from Spain. Jose.
Thank you very much, Leo. Firstly, I would like to start with a quick round of thanks and congratulations. Thanks for inviting us to participate here to explain our point of view, particularly to Brenda, who has been so helpful in the preparation of the agenda and our participation. Thank you very much for that. And congratulations to all of you, to FACCE, by the 10th anniversary. I am already the first one in volunteering for taking part in the 20th anniversary in 10 years' time, so please take note of that. As for our priorities, well, that's quite clear from our point of view, and we started and we launched our bioeconomy strategy a few years ago. Since that moment, our priorities are crystal clear. We are boosting a bioeconomy, we are boosting agriculture, which is very, very efficient and is based on the sustainable and efficient use and production of natural resources. This is key for us. You may take a look at the map, you may understand what our constraints are, water availability, soil availability. That means that we are targeting sectors which are crucial for us. Firstly, the food sector. Food sector is critical for Spain, not only in terms of economic growth, but in terms of jobs, new jobs, in terms of exports, and in terms of the eagerness and the willingness of the private sector for investing in new technologies, in research and innovation activities. This is why food is so critical for us. But the agriculture definitely, and the whole primary production sectors are definitely critical for us. We are also having a huge focus on those industrial bio-based or those industrial products which can also be produced from sustainable resources. These bio-based products are taking more and more interest from our stakeholders, and that's definitely one of our priorities. But as we were saying before, Spain is highly constrained by the availability of natural resources, particularly water and soil, and this is critical for us. Most of the Mediterranean basin falls under a waterfall regime below 800 millimeters per year. That makes it very difficult to have a continuous soil green cover. That makes that our carbon contained, our organic matter contained in the soils is limited, and we need to focus there. That's why we are understanding the soil not only as a reservoir for organic matter, but we need to focus on what practices farmers need to focus on. Because what we need is to ensure that the soil degradation, that the soil erosion, that the loss of fertility is stopped. We need to build there. That's why one of our focus is definitely on farmers. And we've been discussing agriculture the whole morning, but farmers has not been highlighted. Their importance is critical for us as well. So those practices that we can ensure that increase the yields of the crops, that increase the productivity, and eventually increase the farmers' incomes will be welcome. Keeping on top of everything, definitely a sustainability umbrella. And we need to focus stronger on farmers. That would be a way for us to change agriculture and to make it more sustainable and contribute to climate change, definitely. And our last word in this first intervention is related to the food industry. They are eager to keep investing in research and innovation activities. They understand innovation as part of their key activities. And we need to help them in investing more and more in Spain, but in Europe as well. We need to focus on those food processing technologies that are eventually more efficient in the use of water and in the use of energy. And we would like to take the whole value chain into account, the whole stakeholders, the whole spectrum of stakeholders. That's what we definitely take a look at the end users, the citizens, and food safety, food quality, those practices that ensure that citizens are going to make the best selection when they're purchasing the products are going to be critical for us. Last word then is for the role of technologies. New technologies will have an impact, enormous impact, in the overall sustainability. I'd like to stop there just to make sure that I'm sticking to the 5 minutes I had assigned. Thank you, Gundrun. Back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jose Manuel. You've raised a number of issues that I'd be very keen to get us all talking about around the table as we proceed through the rest of the morning, particularly how to involve farmers and also the involvement of the private sector. I feel that other contributors in this session will have their own ideas about how best to approach these issues that you have so succinctly raised from the perspective of Spain. Let's turn now to the Polish view, and Agata, please.
Thank you very much, Leo. I hope you can hear me well. So, firstly, my warm congratulations to JPI FACCE, to the Secretariat, to all persons that were involved in the initiative for this great long period. It's a great achievement and we are looking forward to more. So back to the question that you have raised at the beginning. I would start with the fact that the few words about the Polish economy, because the economy of Poland is an industrialized mixed economy with a developed market that serves as the 6th largest in the European Union and the largest among the former Eastern Bloc. I think that all of our audience are aware of that. The Polish Rni system is centralized for the purpose of funding and governance, while the most important reforms have taken place in the last 2 years under the new Act on Higher Education and Science. We are, however, aware of the challenges that still persist because despite these recent efforts I have just mentioned, Poland is still a moderate innovator according to European Innovation Scoreboard 2020. But supported by public financing and the significant role of the EU structural funds, Rni investment has gradually increased. and links between academia and business sector in our country are systematically strengthened. The best example is the establishment of Łukasiewicz Research Network, the Europe's third largest research network in our country, where science and business meet together. Getting to the strategy and priorities, our national Rni strategy and priorities are documented mostly in the strategy for responsible development for the period up to 2020, but the perspective is up to 2030. And the strategy was adopted by Council of Ministers in February 2017, because I'm talking about this because we do not have, for example, bioeconomy strategies, just like Jose mentioned. We do not have, but we are working on it. We have some roadmaps toward it. And this SRD states, the strategy states that the industry is the core area for the increase in innovation for our country. What is also important, the crisis situation related to COVID-19 pandemic revealed disruptions in the functioning of the food supply chain. So it would be the second priority, as well as the problems in the free movement of agri-food products and the workers. So broken food chains disrupted the trade, and this we also see as a problem. What I also want to mention is soil health. There is a great problem in soil. Well, I want to say that, just give me a minute. There is a high percentage of low fertile soils in Poland. It is estimated that around 89% of Polish soils are all lower quality. So all the actions that are related to soil health are also very important to us. I want to stick into this 5 minutes, so just tell me, Leo, if I still have some time or not. 1 minute, perfect. So I will fit into the time. So putting all of this, what I have already said, into the European strategic development context, our main goal for the next Horizon Europe program is to be involved in the European partnerships, agroecology, soil health mission. The next instrument are the missions, so the soil health missions, and of course in the alignment of national and European research programs through the initiatives such as JPI FACCE. And here I want to put a point. Thank you very much. Back to you, Leo.
Garamila Mayagot Agata, August Bekupla Fakal going Inish on Kantor Erenach. I hope people will forgive me introducing Frank in the Irish language. But over to you, Frank.
Good morning, everybody. And I would like to echo the comments of my colleagues on the panel to congratulate Gudrun and the vice chairs and Heather and the other members of the Secretariat, and not to forget Hartmut Stahl, the recently retired chair of the governing board, for organising such a great event yesterday and today. So, Leo, the question was, what are the priorities in Ireland in relation to food security and climate change and research? And I suppose, look, to ask someone in my position as Director of Research of a broad programme, what are your priorities, is like asking a child in a sweet shop, which sweets do you like best? So it's hard, but there are two standout priorities, I think, for us here in Ireland. And the first relates to the viability and livelihoods earned by our farmers. And you know, farming is, as you know, Leo, very important in Ireland. It's a huge component. It's the backbone of the rural economy here. And only about a third of our farms are actually economically viable. So we have to keep that very much in mind with all we do, that the farmers, the people that live on the land and that tend to our crops and tend to our livestock, their priority is actually their livelihoods. So the second standout priority then for us here in research in Ireland is sustainability. You know, we think we have reasonably good performance in sustainability, but we have probably a lot of room to improve as well. And we export most of our main livestock products. About 90% of our beef and dairy products are exported, And increasingly, our customers are demanding, you know, that we have the highest standards of sustainability. So in terms of environmental sustainability, there are 4 dimensions. It's, again, hard to pick one as being more important, but water quality, biodiversity, and gaseous emissions, and that's both greenhouse gases and ammonia. And I suppose, you know, maybe to focus in this morning on the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, developing solutions to reduce emissions from agriculture is a huge priority for us. And we've seen already this morning the research from Catherine Stanton and her team in the MetLab project. And we have a lot of research and a lot of high priority put on trying to develop technologies that reduce emissions from agriculture. We are also increasingly focused on the offsetting, and I was very interested in Pete Smith's presentation from the Devil project, and what are the potential, or what is the opportunity to increase carbon sequestration in our grasslands, because most of our agricultural land is taken up by grassland. So we are establishing a new soil carbon observatory to get better information on where on how much carbon is in our soils, and how can we plug the leaky hotspots that are emitting a lot of carbon from our soils, and enhance the sequestration into our mineral soils through management practices. So the third priority then that I'd like to focus on, maybe Leo, and it's a little bit different from maybe my colleagues, because as you mentioned, we're not just a research organization, we also have a big agricultural advisory or extension component. So a huge priority for us is to translate the findings from research to our farmers, and to support them to adopt the knowledge that we are generating. So in the area of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, we are initiating a new knowledge transfer program called the Signpost Farm program, where we're going to establish approximately 100 demonstration farms. These are real farmers' farms to implement the technologies and the methodology, farming methods that we know that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and enhance carbon sequestration. And we'll work with those farms, not you know, in a dogmatic way, but we'll work with them in a living lab environment where we want to learn from them as to how they are getting on with implementing practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So very much the priorities, I think, align for us with the whole agenda that has been set out by FACCE, and I can see that continuing for the foreseeable future.
Thanks very much indeed, Frank. Again, plenty of food for discussion as we proceed. I'll turn now to Gianluca again. Gianluca, if you would like, I mean, it's been very interesting to hear the subtle differences in experience from each of the national representatives. How do you see the strategic research agenda contributing to their specific concerns?
Yes, thank you, Leo. I found the speeches of the national representative very interesting, and I captured especially one point, that this transition, because it is clear that we are undergoing a transition, should address firstly farmers, and should consider their viability, their capacity to adapt to a changing environment, but it should be, let's say, strengthen their capacity of life and of compete. So I think that this link between technological solutions and economic solutions is a key to these messages that the national representatives send to us. I would say that the strategic research agenda addresses this, especially in a core theme 2, in which we look at farming, especially not just at technologies, not just at practices, but at farming in the context of their environment and of the constraints and of the opportunities that farmers have in a changing environment. So I think that we are trying really to address this issue. At the same time, we have to consider that also farming will have to undergo a transition. So in some cases, we know that there are unsustainable practices, and this requires an effort from everybody to think on how farming will be shaped in the future to be economically, socially, and ecological sustainable.
Excellent. Before we move on to a broader panel discussion, I'd like to just for a moment bring in Rebecca Fernandez, who's the chair of the Stakeholder Advisory Board. Rebecca, you're very, very welcome. Obviously, the Stakeholder Board is a very important part of the FACCE family. So I was listening particularly to Jose Manuel and his emphasis on involving the private sector, involving farmers, this whole business of getting the stakeholders involved. Do you have any thoughts for our panelists on this issue?
Thanks, Leo. Yes, first, our congratulations as well to everyone involved in FACCE-JPI on this anniversary. And then I bring back the question to the panelists. We have a very broad range of stakeholders represented in our board. And our question to you is how we can interact with the FACCE-JPI on the co-creation of research that responds to our needs. So how can you see this interaction?
Gianluca, would you like to begin to address that? I'm very keen to also hear from Jose Manuel because he raised a lot of this in his presentation.
Yes, I think that Rebecca touched a very interesting point. Actually, we say that in the strategic research agenda, stakeholders' involvement is important. And it's important at a governance level. So the strategic, the stakeholders advisory board have been interacting a lot of times with the governing board and with the scientific board to address specific issues. But I think that the role of stakeholders should be much broader and should introduce a culture of collaboration also at the level of research projects. So starting to set joint initiatives to co-design research, to identify interesting case studies on which to work on, etc. I think that we have done quite a lot during this 10 years, but I think that now we should make, let's say, a leap forward in this collaboration, because from, let's say, the parallel work of these two bodies, we really needed to have a closer interaction.
Jose Manuel, you have made a number of points in this general area about stakeholders, and you seem particularly concerned about ensuring that farmers are brought into the discussion. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on how you think that should be done?
Thank you very much, Leo. And thank you very much, Rebecca. The question is quite relevant and quite interesting indeed. Well, I feel that the way we can do and how we can improve the interaction is just considering stakeholders in the whole spectrum, considering the whole spectrum of stakeholders. That means definitely the research associations or the research groups from academia, from university, from technological centers, from research public bodies, definitely. But let's try to involve all the stakeholders. And I'm taking a look particularly at maybe the advisors as well, and the end users. And for the end users, I'm considering 3 clear steps. On the one side, farmers, as we said. On the other hand, we can also consider the industry, and SMEs are critical within this agricultural and bioeconomy sector throughout Europe. I thought about 90-something% of the industries are SMEs, so that's key for us. And we need to take into account the citizens as well. So this whole spectrum of stakeholders must be considered. How? That's a very good question, which is a very difficult answer. I feel, and I'm very keen to support what the technological platforms at the European level are doing. I think they are compiling in a very good way the main needs, the main priorities of an industrial sector. And they have a very good structure to canalize their needs towards the European Commission. You could also consider them, and I'm sure you're contacting with them as well. So that could be a good way. And that's what I would recommend you to do stronger in the near future.
Frank Gomara, you touched on this in your presentation. In particular, of course, you have the advantage, I think, of the Agricultural Advisors Programme being within your own organisation. Are there, do you think, lessons from Ireland that could be adapted in Spain or Poland or anywhere else in Europe?
Look, the lessons are really around human behaviour that are, applicable everywhere and anywhere. We often are guilty as scientists of saying farmers in particular, in this topic, must do this or should do that or have to change. And, you can't speak at a group of people like that. You have to actually go and understand their concerns, their perspective on things and listen to them. And then you involve them. And we put a lot of, I suppose, effort and a lot of emphasis on involving stakeholders, and whether that's very often farmers, but it can also be policymakers or industry, involving them in the in setting out the research priorities. And then we try to do as much on-farm research as we can, because it involves farmers in the research and gives them a sense of ownership of it. And then we communicate a lot with farmers about the results. And farmers are very logical people, as are most stakeholders, and they believe the science. And I think if you can involve them in the creation of the science and the knowledge, well, then I think you're far more likely to be going to see the adoption of the new knowledge that comes from that research and that science. So that's what we do. We work with the stakeholders very, very closely at all steps in the process.
Okay, I'd like to broaden it out to a broader discussion, and please, at any time, if you want to come in, and I'm particularly pleased if you decide to talk among yourselves, as it were. If people want to raise questions with their colleagues, please feel free to do so. This is should not feel like a formal session of each person pays for the mic and uses it as they go. Please feel free to chip in as you wish. It's not really, we're moving on now, as I said, to other issues. You were very, very clear about the way in which the Polish economy is changing and developing, and the ambitions that Poland has for advancing its economic progress. But what do you think, what would you recommend prioritizing in the common research agenda that would help Poland to transition to climate-friendly and sustainable agriculture?
Thank you, Leo. Yes, as you have mentioned, Poland has traditionally strong agriculture, food processing, and forestry sectors. Our agriculture, the Polish one, takes the 6th position in the EU by value, just behind France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. What I have already mentioned is the soil health, because we are facing the danger of desertification. So I'm always coming back to the mission on soils and the engagement of citizens in the missions, because this is all the concept of the missions, to take the citizens, to make them engaged in the research that are made on the European level. The next thing that I would mention are the agroecological research, as agroecology can support the achievement of multiple objectives: economic one, environmental, social, nutritional, health, cultural. So we are speaking about holistic approach, and this is what is very important. So what I want to also mention, that this approach, I mean agroecology, is contributing directly to achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So by this approach, holistic approach, we are getting much more. We cannot only focus on soil or only focus on feedstock, only focus on plant, because all these areas are interlinked. So we have to think about all of this at the same time. It's not that we can only pick one and it will help Poland. And it's not only about Poland, it's about the whole European Union. So we have to bear in mind this. Thank you very much, Leah. Back to you.
And Jose, do you have a particular perspective on the soil issue in particular, which must be of a major concern for a country like Spain?
It is indeed. It is a major concept. And I briefly mentioned that at the beginning. I was even tempted to talk a little bit more about forestry, but I was quite sure that my colleague Agatha was going to raise that point, and even Gudrun afterwards. But regarding the soil, that's critical for us, and a very good question indeed. And as I said, I tried to briefly mention it at the beginning. Due to the water regime in Spain, that's critical for us. We need to concentrate strongly on the carbon matter in the soil. But for that, what we need to make sure is that we try to make this soil green cover, which is very difficult to have with such a low waterfall regime here. So we are focusing on these conservation practices, and we are trying to encourage everybody here to keep these soil management practices, conservation practices, to avoid the degradation of the soil, the erosion, and to try to increase as much as possible the soil fertility. That's critical for us, and that's why we're trying to emphasize the role of soil there. And that's why we are so supportive of any initiative related to soil. And we are quite happy with the Commission and the mission board members trying to launch this mission on soil, which is going to have very, very good impact for the whole Europe. Thank you. Back to you, Leo.
Frank, in the years now, 10 years now that I've been involved with FACCE, one thing that comes up very frequently when they talk about Ireland is the way in which it's felt generally, I think, within FACCE, that Ireland is very proactive at picking up the ball and running with initiatives, taking advantage of program calls and so on. So I'm just wondering, for the more general audience, what your advice would be based on your experience of the FACCE calls. What can you maybe suggest to other countries that they might do to get the kind of engagement that I certainly feel FACCE gets from Ireland? Okay, well, look, we have been enthusiastic supporters of FACCE since the very start. Leo, I think I have been on the governing board since its inception 10 years ago. And look, we're a small country. You know, we have lots of good scientists in Teagasc and in our universities, but they're small in number. And we, you know, we've always been very open to international collaboration, and we really feel, you know, that's essential. And in this, particularly in a topic like climate change, you know, it's while all research is local, this really is a global problem. And Europe has taken a very brave approach to climate change and really, I suppose, leading the way. And we feel that, you know, we have to be involved at a European level, obviously, while being very conscious of dealing with the issues that are pertinent at home here in Ireland. You know, we feel it's really important to be involved at European level so that we can be aware, I suppose, of developments and advances in other countries, but also that policymakers at European level are aware of the science that's coming from Ireland. And again, I go back to this point, you know, that science and information is really important. And I think, you know, we saw in the talks this morning from Maggie and from Jean Luca, you know, we need science to inform policymakers. And that's policymakers here in Ireland or in Paris or in Warsaw or wherever. But, you know, I think it's really important that the collective science then is available to the policymakers in Brussels. So we've just engaged in the initiatives. We took the lead in the coordination of FACCE Iragas, one of the IRANETs that FACCE has been responsible for. And look, I think it has been of huge benefit to our scientists and to our research system here in Ireland to be involved at such a busy level, I suppose, in these transnational projects. And I could only recommend to every country to engage in it. You know, it's worth the effort. Well, Frank, you mentioned the great Maggie Gill, and she's actually got an interesting question for Agatha. Maggie was wondering, Agatha, if you could expand a bit on engagement with the private sector. She wonders, do you get good engagement from the small and medium-sized enterprises and indeed from the multinationals?
I would answer that it depends, because the private sector in our country was greatly involved in creating the strategy for the development that I have mentioned, that is our main one in our country. There are also many associations and platforms working under our Ministry for Development that are regularly consulted on all matters. When we created the roadmap towards circular economy, there was a group that contained of a lot of stakeholders. There were not only business, industry, academia, but also representatives. And they were consulted, so they were giving their ideas to put in. Policymakers in the ministry created a document that is the way of their thinking, but it was the document.
She's going to dial back in. I mean, these issues are inevitable. I mean, there's really no avoiding occasional glitches like that. Could I broaden out the question into something much broader and ask you to address Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe? I'm curious to see how you see your national priorities developing specifically in the context of these programs. Jose Manuel, would you like to begin on that?
Okay, thank you. How long do I have to answer that question? Well, frankly speaking, let me tell you that one of the biggest achievements we had from the last few years was that once we raised the Spanish strategy on science and technology, what we did is that we mirrored the strategy of Europe and the Horizon 2020 strategy. That's where we have a specific challenge based on the bioeconomy. And I feel that was a very good idea, just to make sure that all the stakeholders in Spain, scientists, academia, researchers, enterprises, understood that our priorities are definitely in line with European ones. What I think it's quite difficult for us to make Europe understand and Brussels understand that we have a stronger limitation in terms of natural resources availability. That's why we're focusing so strongly on the water availability, the water uptake of plants, the water efficiency, and the soil availability as well. So overall speaking, I'm quite happy with the way the European Commission is dealing with the priorities and how they are defining the main challenges for within the bioeconomy sector. But what I think we need to emphasize a little bit further is this point on the natural resources. And secondly, the role of the different stakeholders. From our point of view, there are many different pillars within, not only within Horizon 2020, but within Horizon Europe as well. And there is a specific pillar focused on basic research and a specific pillar for the industrial leadership and societal challenges. So the most basic research should be done in the first pillar. And within this second pillar, the societal challenges and the industrial leadership, I think we need to focus and to increase a little bit more the technology readiness level of the activities we are supporting. I feel that we should have to give a bigger role to the industry. That way we could encourage applicants and participants to scale up the research results of previous Horizon 2020 projects and get a little bit closer to the market. That's something we need to work a little bit harder in the next few years. Thank you. Back to you, Leo.
Thank you indeed. Frank, there's been a question in from Hayden Montgomery, who's wondering, it's related to this issue. He was interested in your comments about the issues being global, and he wondered, in the next phase of FACCE-JPI, the next 10 years, what response do you think the EU generally should have to make their strategies, Horizon, among other things, more closely linked to the global agenda. And he wonders specifically about platforms such as the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. Would you like to take that question?
Yeah, I will. And good morning, Hayden, or good evening, wherever you're calling from in Europe or New Zealand. And yes, look, the European Union obviously has to be well aware and involved in global initiatives. And FACCE then, I think, takes a similar view. And we have obviously New Zealand as a member of FACCE, and the ERANET that we ran ourselves, FACCE ERAGAS. New Zealand were a strong participant in that ERANET. But to come to the Global Research Alliance, like there are many European countries that are members of the Global Research Alliance, including Ireland, indeed. And FACCE has in the past collaborated with the Global Research Alliance, and I would see that happening again in the future. We've also collaborated with the Belmont Forum, and I think Pete Smith's project that we saw earlier on today came out of a joint call with the Belmont Forum. So I think FACCE will take an equally outlooking view and seek to involve ourselves in collaboration with other global initiatives for the next 10 years, as we have in the last 10 years. So, and we look forward to working with the Global Research Alliance in particular, because it has a very good structure and a very good organization capability. So we look forward to working with them in the coming years very closely.
And I'd like to bring Gudrun back in here because, I'm sorry, Gudrun, I kind of let the national representative speak there for a while, but I think it is important to get back to the core message of FACCE-JPI and its need really to take account of the need to create impact and contribute to solutions. I mean, how do you see FACCE-JPI contributing in that area?
Thank you, Leo. Well, I think it's extremely important to listen to national issues and also to recommendations, because this is what we are actually here for. So what I have kind of as a take-home messages up to now is that we have to involve farmers, because they are one of the most important stakeholders if we want to reach goals. The second would be also the private sector, because the private sector is representing a huge stakeholder, be it SMEs, be it huge industry, because they have a huge influence also on the way we move, and of course, in line also with our citizens. I also have heard a lot about the soil health, and I think it is timely that we are now much more involved in looking at our soil and the role our soil is playing, and the European Joint Program on Soil, EJP Soil. And I think we are all members of this very, very new partnership. They can play a role together with the soil mission later on. But you were also asking about how we want to create the impact. And I think this is on the agenda for the next 10 years. Together with creation of new knowledge, because we cannot give in on that part, but we have to at the same time focus much more on impact. And I think that is an understanding that is kind of popping up everywhere, be it in the Commission, be it in national agendas, being it on a global level, that we have to co-create. That means we have to involve stakeholders. We have to create solutions that work for people, and that means farmers, industries, consumers, and so on. So and that brings me also back to what Frank Ebert said yesterday in the session from Euractiv. The solutions have to be local, but can be applied globally as well. So we have to kind of find this balancing, using diversity to help ourselves, and at the same time contribute on the huge level or on the global level. And that is also, I think, point which has been risen by the GRA, by Hayden, that we have to, of course, cooperate with the global partnerships, for example, with countries which are not European, and New Zealand is a perfect example for that. So I think our focus will be on impact, and that means also we have to look at what we have achieved. ERA-nets, which are in our remit, and this might not even be limited to FACCE ERA-nets, but also other ERA-nets which are in our area, so that we actually pick up the treasures which we have created and then let them work for our future, for our climate, for our planet. Thank you.
Agatha, I saw you nodding with a lot of what Gudrun was saying there. From your perspective in Poland, I mean, what will you be looking for from FACCE-JPI as we look forward to the next 10 years? What do you think what their priorities should be?
I think that the current strategic research agenda is absolutely...
It would seem that we've lost her again. That's very unfortunate. Jose Manuel, I'd maybe put the same question to you about looking again, talking now about the strategy for the next 10 years. What would you be looking to JPI to do, the FACCE-JPI to do over the next 10 years? What do you think they should be doing that maybe they haven't been focused on so much in the past 10 years?
Okay, firstly, I think they need to focus on, we all need to focus on the 20th anniversary of the FACCE. Okay, so we will have to work for that event in 10 years' time. But I think we need to work all together in a transition to an impact-driven research programming. That would be key. For that, I think we may have some ideas on or suggestions on how to work for that. Definitely, the more budget we've got, the higher the budget we've got, the bigger the impact. That would be definitely a key issue. But even with a specific budget or with a fixed budget, it will be important to support many activities, not just focus on very large initiatives. I think that if we support small activities, that would be a good idea as well. And what I think we need to move on is just to ensure the public-private cooperation. That would be key as well. And I have some examples in mind. For example, I'm coming from a funding agency focused on innovation. That means that we only focused or support and fund enterprises, but we encourage, not only encourage, but it's compulsory for them to subcontract part of the activities to research bodies, to research entities. At the same time, the research agenda in Spain has many different tools and funding instruments to make sure that the cooperation between the private and the public sector is efficient. And there are very good examples at the European level, the joint technology initiatives as well. They are driven by the industry. The industry is saying what the priorities are. And then the academia is working for them to make sure that they can contribute to this, to achieve these priorities and these needs. It's very important to have the overall role of member states there to make sure and to put an eye on the overall sustainability. So that's something we need to do.
I apologize. We're coming very close to the end of this session, and I do want to leave a little bit of time at the very end for Gianluca to kind of summarize what we've been talking about and give us a sense of what we can draw from this very, very interesting session. But Frank, I wanted to pick up on what Jose Manuel was talking about, this whole issue of impact-driven research programming. Do you think, and again, this I'm always interested in the Irish perspective here, not just because I'm Irish, but do you think that member states are prepared for Horizon Europe's new approach on mission-driven actions, on investing in partnerships and impact-driven topics?
Look, I think they are. They're an evolution from what we have had, and I think the joint programming initiatives and the ERA-nets in previous Horizon or Europe framework programs have set the scene really for the partnerships that are coming in Horizon Europe. So I think, you know, in terms of what role FACCE can play in that, I think, look, we have a very good strategic research agenda that has very broad support among over 20 European countries. And I think that that strategic research agenda and the expertise and the the network that FACCE has can be a great support to the soil mission, the new soil mission, and also to some of the partnerships, in particular maybe the partnership on agroecological living labs. And as Gudrun has mentioned earlier, the European Joint Programme on Soils. I think FACCE can really support those initiatives and contribute to the thinking in those around what are the strategic priorities. And I think FACCE also, you know, through events like this, we have, because of the broad base of membership of FACCE, I think we have a great channel to policymakers right around the different member countries and also then at EU level. And I think we can use that to channel the science and the knowledge that is developed through the FACCE initiatives through to policymakers in particular. And I think that's a key role that FACCE can play and contribute to this impact that we all seek to achieve from our research.
Great, Frank. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely wonderful discussion. I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you all very much for that. I wanted to give the floor to Gianluca for a couple of minutes now at the end to maybe just reflect a little bit on what we've heard and how you think that, how all of this fits in to the FACCE-JPI agenda.
Yes, thank you, Leo. I think, yes, I agree with you that the debate was really very, very interesting and very, let's say, inspiring. I would start from the image I gave on the beginning. In my view, FACCE is an ecosystem of institutions, actors of different types of kind, and also infrastructures. And having this in mind, it means that each of the actors of the system should concur to the achievement of a general goal. And on this regard, it's important to stress the importance of the system approach. For example, if we consider soils, soils are a core argument. But in my view, soils cannot be addressed just by soil scientists, because in order to address the soil issue, you need to consider the constraints that farmers live in, for example, applying new technologies, or in which context some technologies will fit and which are not. So it is important to try to understand, to address each of the aspects that have been considered by the representative of the member states into a broader context, having in mind the general goals. And FACCE on this regard shows that research policy is much wider than research. And then it's also much wider than just research projects, because there is a lot of activities of interaction, of networking, of learning, of dissemination, and of assessment that really FACCE can contribute to strengthen and to align all the actors towards these goals. I think that for the 2 minutes, it's enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Gianluca. Again, my thanks to all the panel. It really was a very, very interesting discussion. Sorry, we had some minor technical glitches, but that's inevitable in this setting. But we will be back with more at 2 o'clock Central European time. It could be any time wherever you are in the world, but we'll see you in an hour.